Ladies and gentlemen, His Magnificence, Rector Commandant of the National Defense University, Major General Bogusław Pacek, will take the floor.
Minister, NATO Secretary General, Ministers, Generals, Admirals, Excellencies, Professors, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor to welcome you, Minister Secretary General of the NATO, to National Defense University, a higher education institution which educates over 10,000 military and civilian students for the benefit of security and defense. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Anders Fogh Rasmussen. Today we have a pleasure to participate in the Security Forum organized under the patronage of the President of the Republic of Poland, Bronisław Komorowski. Months ago, the forum was opened by President Lech Wałęsa. During previous sessions, we enjoyed speeches delivered by presidents, ministers, ambassadors, generals. You are the 10th Jubilee guest of our forum. It's an honor for the National Defense University that today the NATO Secretary General is with us. He is also the particular person being the symbol of the security and defense. Dear guests, let me remind you that before taking his duties in 2009, Anders Fogh Rasmussen's political career included numerous positions in the Danish government and opposition. He was the Minister for Taxation, the Minister of Economic Affairs, as well as a member of the EU's ECOFIN Council. Another important part of Anders Fogh Rasmussen's career was the position of Prime Minister of Denmark. Then, in April 2009, he was elected NATO Secretary General. Anders Fogh Rasmussen was awarded Medal in Merit in Gold and Grand Cross of the Order of Dannebrog. Recently, he was also awarded the Doctor Honoris Causa title by the University of Bucharest. This is the first time for the Warsaw National University to be visited by the NATO Secretary General. Thank you very much for this honor, because due to your presence here, the NDU is privileged today being an intellectual center of the Alliance. The lecture entitled A Strong Europe for a Strong NATO is attended by ministers today, generals, admirals, commanders and soldiers of the Polish Armed Forces, but also ambassadors and defense attaché accredited to Poland, the representatives of the world of science, clergy, rectors of higher education institutions, professors and students of the National Defense University. With us are also the representatives of the Polish Defense Holding, whose performance supports the technical modernization of the Polish Armed Forces. I would like to welcome warmly Under Secretary of State and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Bogusław, Under Secretary of State and the Minister of National Defense, Mr. Professor Robert Kupiecki, Chief of the General Staff of the Polish Armed Forces, Lieutenant General Mieczysław Gocuł. I welcome all audience. We are happy as NDU seeing today so many guests. Dear guests, the speech of the NATO Secretary General will be followed by a session of questions and answers, during which I will be supported by Marek Świerczyński. Where is Marek Świerczyński? He is a news journalist, editor of the Polish Poland and World program and TVN24 channel, a former employee at BBC Polish section, RMF radio station and Polish public TV channel. But now it's time to start. Yes, welcome. Mr. Secretary General, please take the floor and deliver your lecture.
And as said by Professor Pacek, our honorable guest today is the leader of unique experience and impressive achievements, a staunch liberal coming from a land of high taxation and redistribution, and despite that, 3 times a prime minister there. He has a unique experience of Poland, as he was the one to lead the final stage of the EU accession negotiations for Poland and 9 other countries back in 2002, known as the Copenhagen Summit. He then took the lead of NATO in 2009 in a very difficult moment. Whether successfully or not, that is perhaps for us to debate later on. And last but not least, he is tipped by many to be the next President of the European Commission. But here and now, still, the Secretary General of NATO, Mr. Anders Fogh Rasmussen. Please, the floor is yours.
General Patek, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a great pleasure to speak at the Academy of National Defense in Warsaw. Over the past 20 years, you have earned an excellent reputation as a prestigious academy. You are now sharing your experience and expertise in defense education reform with universities in many NATO partner countries. On behalf of NATO, I thank you for your work. It is a key contribution to security and stability. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
69 years ago today, Allied forces launched Operation Overlord, and the D-Day landings began. Polish forces served with great distinction in the Battle of Normandy and the many battles that followed. Those brave Poles fought not just for the freedom of Poland, but for the freedom of us all. They continued a proud and honorable tradition that began 350 years ago with the founding of the School of Knights. And they demonstrated that a country can achieve more by operating together with allies than it can alone. Today, that tradition still thrives. And that lesson still holds. 2,000 members of the Polish armed forces are currently deployed in operations. Many are serving with courage and professionalism in Afghanistan and in Kosovo, alongside servicemen and women from NATO and our partner countries. And actually, I had the pleasure to greet some of them just before I entered this room. Together, they are making Poland safer, Europe safer, and all the allies safer. And I would like to thank the Polish armed forces for everything they do to guarantee our security. Our troops are starting to come home from Afghanistan. That is because we have stopped Al-Qaeda from using Afghanistan as a safe haven. We are building strong Afghan security forces. And so we have improved our security and that of the world. But other threats exist. Our world remains unpredictable, and we must stand prepared for any surprises. In my view, the biggest dangers to our security are not cyber warfare, terrorism, or proliferation. These are challenges, but they are not obstacles. I would say the real obstacles are Europe's own limited ambitions in today's world. I believe that Europe must raise its sights. It should have the confidence, the conviction, and the capabilities to play its full part in shaping the 21st century. And Poland can help show the way. Poland was in the first group of former Warsaw Pact countries to join NATO in 1999, along with Hungary and the Czech Republic. And just 5 years later, you were also in the first group of former communist countries to join the European Union. I'm proud to have helped negotiate the conditions for Poland's entry into the European Union, as mentioned at the Copenhagen summit in December 2002. 6 months later, I visited Poland to encourage the Polish people to vote yes to EU membership. I was honored to speak at the Castle of Dukes of Pomerania in Szczecin. I said then that the chance was yours and the choice was yours. And I was heartened that your overwhelming choice was the European Union. The past 10 years have demonstrated the collective wisdom of these choices. In NATO and in the European Union, Poland is safer. It is stronger. And it is richer. With economic integration, Polish trade has flourished. And this country has avoided some of the economic difficulties that have troubled many other European countries. Today, those difficulties are forcing many NATO allies to reduce their investments in defense. But lower defense budgets and fewer military capabilities could translate into less influence for Europe. And instead of being a significant actor on the global stage, Europe risks becoming a simple spectator. So we are now at a historic turning point, and we have to be clear about what we want. Do we want to act, or do we want to watch? In the past, better security led to better economic growth. With NATO focusing on hard security, the European Union was able to focus on economic growth and deeper political integration. In sum, a stronger NATO meant a stronger Europe. And this remains true today. The emphasis, however, has changed. Now, a strong Europe is necessary to sustain a strong NATO. By increasing investments in defense and by increasing the availability of key military capabilities, Europeans will be able to act more effectively. Nationally, within the European Union, and within NATO. Defense investments will yield more global influence. They will deliver more security for our peoples. And they will help us to advance a global agenda in line with our values. At the end of this year, a European Council will focus on security and defense. This will be the first European Council dedicated to defense issues since 2008. And it could not be more timely. It will be the ideal opportunity to deliver the strong Europe we need. But let me be clear. What we don't need are more bureaucracies. What we do need are more capabilities. Quite simply, a European Council that does not make a commitment to invest in hard military capabilities will be nothing but hot air. And it won't bring us any closer to the strong and capable Europe we need. As we prepare for that European Council, it is vital we all keep in mind three key points. First, soft power alone isn't enough. If we want to have credibility and exert influence, then hard capabilities are essential to back up our diplomacy. We have seen this in the Western Balkans, where restoring stability has required a mix of hard and soft power. The European Union brokered the recent agreement between Pristina and Belgrade, but NATO provided the security assurances both parties needed before they agreed to implement it. Second, if European defence budgets continue to decline, many of our nations will no longer be able to help manage crises, whether through NATO, the European Union, or the United Nations. So we must stop the cuts, hold the line on defence spending, and reinvest in security as our economies recover. Our main challenge is not just about what we spend, it is also about how we spend. Too much funding goes on salaries and static equipment instead of research and deployable capabilities. And many allies spend scarce sums on capabilities we already have or no longer need. Here in Europe, our nations should do more to coordinate their spending and their programs so we can develop forces that are more coherent, more modern, and more effective. We must also do more multinationally instead of nationally. I understand the political concerns that inhibit the creation of a more transparent and open European defence market, but we must remember that today a purely national defence is a pure illusion. Many of the critical defence capabilities we need are just too expensive for any individual country to deliver alone. Finally, having the right capabilities is important, but it's not enough. We must also have the political will to use them. We must be prepared to deal with security challenges on Europe's doorstep, to help manage crises further afield that might affect us here at home, and to better share the security burden with our North American allies. For this to happen, European nations must not remain distracted by their economic woes. Instead, we must develop a truly global perspective. We must stand united, not divided. We must look outwards, not inwards. And Europe and North America must hold more open and frank discussion on the global issues that concern all of us, within NATO and between NATO and the European Union. Hard power, defense investment, political will, and a stronger Europe. This is the path towards a more secure European future. Fortunately, Poland is setting an excellent example for us to follow. Since 2008, Poland has made great strides in increasing its defense investment. It is one of the few allies whose expenditure approaches the NATO target of 2% of the gross domestic product. And I want to congratulate Poland for this effort. You have also led the way in multilateral cooperation, both in NATO and the European Union. And within the Weimar and Visegrad groups, this multinational approach is already helping us to fill some of our serious capability shortfalls. I now urge Poland to build on this cooperation through continuing to invest in modern deployable forces and capabilities and continuing to demonstrate the political will to use them. Ladies and gentlemen, the Polish soldiers of the Battle of Normandy fought for the cause of freedom. And today's Polish soldiers are doing the same. We must honor their efforts and their sacrifices by building a strong Europe. A Europe that is able and willing to act. A Europe that has a global vision. And a Europe that can operate alongside North America in defense of our values. That is the Europe the European Council should deliver in December. And that is the Europe we all need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I promised today to give chance to our students, but sir, please, I would like to be your first student, if I may, to raise the first question. I know, and everybody knows, that you are after some meetings with Polish authorities, including Polish President Bronisław Komorowski, and you are very familiar with Polish assessment and Polish some future plans. What is your assessment of the current position of Poland in NATO? You explained some very significant issues, and about the future membership of Poland in future operations, peace operations, stabilization operation.
It works. Yes. Thank you very much. In today's meetings with the President, the Foreign Minister and Defense Minister, I had the opportunity to thank Poland wholeheartedly for your significant contributions to NATO and your strong commitment to our alliance. Significant contributions to our operations in Afghanistan and Kosovo, participation in a number of multilateral projects, an offer to host one of the future missile defense facilities, leadership, as I mentioned in my introduction this afternoon, leadership of regional cooperation, You're also going to host a major military exercise later this year, the exercise Steadfast Jazz. All these examples are testament to Poland's commitment to our alliance. So I consider Poland a staunch ally. About the future, I would expect Poland to continue that strong commitment to our alliance, including contributions to possible future NATO operations. And in very concrete terms, I encouraged the political leaders today to consider positively a Polish contribution to the NATO-led training mission that will be established in Afghanistan from 2015. In general, I see NATO gradually change from a deployed NATO to a prepared NATO. We have for 2 decades now deployed armed forces to operations in the Balkans, in Afghanistan. We are drawing down operations. In exchange, we should step up our efforts to connect our armed forces, to maintain and further develop their ability to work and operate together. And I would expect Poland to be an active part of that so-called Connected Forces initiative.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, as promised, we are starting our Q&A session with the Secretary General. Secretary General, please let me start this with continuing on the Afghan issue. It is just after your meetings in the US last weekend and this week's ministerial meeting in Brussels that you've outlined the nearest future beyond ISAF mission that is going to end next year. Would you like to tell us something more about this? And beyond that, is this already a finished issue, or are more decisions to be taken in the nearest months and years, especially during the also announced next year's NATO summit?
More decisions have to be taken, including the exact size of the training mission that will be established in 2015. But we have taken a number of decisions already, and at the defense ministers' meeting this week, we adopted what is called a concept of operations, which create the overall framework for our training mission from 2015. Now our military planners will continue planning within that framework, and in October we expect to adopt what is called an operations plan, which is a more detailed plan. So my answer to your question is the overall decisions have been made. We are following the roadmap we outlined already in Lisbon in 2010, according to which the Afghans will gradually take more and more responsibility for the security. Our ISAF mission will be completed by the end of 2014. A training mission will be established from 2015. All these overall decisions have been made, but more detailed decisions remain, and they will be taken in the months to come.
And these details are very important because many countries have promised to end their commitment in Afghanistan. Now some voices, for instance in the United States, suggest that there will be some need for a bridging force, some more troops in the interim period before the Afghans will be able to take care about their security by themselves. It's a very important issue also for Poland, for our armed forces. Any questions from the floor in regard of the Afghan mission, please?
Yes, now it's time for you. You are waiting for questions from our audience, students, but not only students, our guests, officers, please. Yes, please. Yes. Please use the microphone. You are prepared, no problem. Okay.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Maciej Hilczuk. I'm from Polska Zbrojna, Polish Army's military news portal. Sir, in European Union, we can notice some kind of a process called Europe of two speed. Is there any risk that because of the budget cuts and the financial crisis, is there any risk that we will see the NATO of two speed in the future? Thank you very much.
It's absolutely a relevant question because we are witnessing a growing gap within our alliance, a growing gap between Europe on the one side and in particular the United States on the other side. But we are also seeing a gap within Europe. But first on the transatlantic gap, during recent years, we have seen the Americans represent a growing part of the overall defense expenditure within our alliance. Today, the United States represent almost three quarters of the overall defense expenditure within our alliance. And that share has been growing during recent years. And we hear voices from Washington that express concerns about this growing gap, and they ask the question, why is it that we, the Americans, will have to pay a growing part of the total bill for our common security? Why couldn't the Europeans pay their fair share of the bill? And I'm concerned that lack of European commitment to the necessary defense investment might, in a longer-term perspective, weaken our alliance, because the Americans would increasingly turn their attention to other parts of the world. So it's very much for us, the Europeans, to demonstrate a commitment that ensures the continued relevance of our alliance. That's one thing. But also within Europe, we are witnessing a gap. A very few bigger allies carry the most of the burden, while we have seen drastic cuts in many European countries. And these cuts are a matter of concern. There is a lower limit as to how little we can spend on defense and still live up to our level of ambition and the obligations within our alliance. So that's why I have that very clear message that we must stop the cuts, and as soon as economies recover, we will have to invest more in defense. If not, we will end up in the scenario you described, a two-speed NATO, and that would, in the long term, weaken our alliance. NATO is the strongest military alliance in the world, and it's clearly my ambition to keep it that way. But to do that, we need sufficient investments in the much-needed military and modern military capabilities.
Thank you very much. Who is next, please?
Tomasz Aleksandrowicz, Academy of Humanities. Sir, a few days ago, Mr. Barack Obama, President of the United States, has said that a war on terror is over. If so, has the West won or lost this war? And later on, could you describe the role of NATO in the years to come in combating terrorism? Because, in my opinion, terrorism is still a clear and present danger, also in Europe, also for us. Thank you.
Well, I think it's more accurate to say that President Obama declared that the war on terror as we have known it is over. But he also stated that we will still be faced with terrorist threats, and we have to adapt to that new pattern. And as a concrete example, we are now drawing down our operation in Afghanistan because actually we have achieved the goal to deny Al-Qaeda a safe haven in Afghanistan. That's why we engaged in that international operation in the first place. And we have achieved that goal. Now it's very much about ensuring that it will not again become a safe haven for terrorists. And to that end, we have spent quite some time and quite some resources on developing the Afghan security forces so that they can take full responsibility for the security in Afghanistan and prevent the country from once again becoming a safe haven for terrorists. So this is an example that we adapt to the evolving situation. I'm confident that the Afghan security forces will be able to take full responsibility for the security by the end of 2014 as planned.
Thank you very much. Next student will be Marek Świeczyński.
Thank you. You were talking about the will, which is, apart from capabilities, a very needed feature in today's NATO. A very, very significant reaction 2 days ago at one of your press conferences after the ministerial meeting, right after you announced that you've agreed as NATO to the request from the Libyan government on a training and advisory mission, very limited one. The reaction from the pool press was whether you can guarantee that this will not become a combat mission, that there will be no troops on the ground in Libya. For me, this is the example of the reluctance and weariness on the side of the European allies. And following that path, is the Northern Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa the next big deal for NATO?
It's a good question. But first of all, we have no intention to put boots on the ground. This is not what it is about. And that's not what the Libyans have requested. I received the Libyan Prime Minister at NATO headquarters a couple of weeks ago, and he forwarded a request for NATO assistance to help build their security institutions, including their military forces. And it's not by accident that he went to NATO with that request, because everybody knows that we do have a lot of expertise in building the security sector. Countries in transition like Libya, transition from dictatorship to democracy, are faced with the very important challenge to also reform their security sector and put it under democratic control. And actually a number of NATO allies do have experience in that field. By the way, Poland is one of them. So they have requested our assistance because they know that we will be able to provide expertise in that field. So what we did was to respond positively, and we decided to send a fact-finding team to Libya to explore together with the Libyan authorities in which areas they want our assistance and in which areas we think we will be able to add value. And then we will decide how to assist the Libyans. So let me stress, this is not about deploying troops to Libya. The Libyans have requested assistance to build their security institutions.
Of course, but the security situation in the region is still far from being stable. Mali is a perfect example from last year, and other countries like Central African Republic. So the sub-Saharan Africa, far closer than Afghanistan, you must admit.
Yeah, and that was the second part of your question. Could I imagine North Africa, the Middle East, as you said, the next area of interest for NATO? Let me stress, NATO's core task is territorial defense of our populations and our societies. And obviously, what is going on our doorstep in North Africa may have an impact on the security in our countries. So obviously we follow the development closely. We have no plans. Let me stress that we have no plans to intervene. But what we can do would be to provide assistance to build their capacity to deal with some of the security challenges themselves. We have partnerships with countries in North Africa and the Middle East, and within those partnerships, we will be able to provide such assistance as the Libyans have now requested. Exactly the same could be provided to other countries in transition. So in that respect, yes, I think it is in the interest of NATO allies to make sure that countries on our doorstep are more capable to address such security challenges on their own. And if we can be of help to build that capacity, I think it is one of NATO's tasks.
Getting back to the questions from the floor.
Audience.
Krzysztof Cilke, Gazeta Polska. Mr. Secretary General, we met in 2009 when I was working for and accompanying late President Lech Kaczyński. And I have to ask this question, what NATO did or still can do to help us investigate in this Smolensk crash. This hall is named after General Gongor. He died in Smolensk, another NATO general. I think we owe it to them. Thank you.
I think this is a bilateral issue between Poland and Russia, and I do hope that these issues can be resolved in a cooperative and constructive manner.
Thank you very much. I saw that somebody some minutes ago raised their hand. Yes, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Kaja Jakubiec. I'm the student from the 5th year of National Defense University. And I've got, I think, the fundamental question about NATO, because I would like you to ask about relations with Russia. So thank you very much.
So, about the NATO relations with Russia. Well, let me be frank with you. It's a mixed picture. We had a NATO-Russia summit in November 2010 in Lisbon. It was a very positive event, and we agreed to develop a true strategic partnership between NATO and Russia. Since then, we have seen progress in some areas, and in other areas we didn't see any progress. We have seen progress when it comes to practical cooperation between NATO and Russia. As an example, we have quite some cooperation on Afghanistan, Russia has provided transit routes for our ISAF mission in Afghanistan. We really appreciate those transit arrangements. We have a well-developed counter-narcotics project in cooperation with Russia and a number of Central Asian countries. Actually, we have trained and educated more than 2,500 counter-narcotics officers. And the reason why Russia is so engaged in that is that Russia suffers from drugs trafficking rooted in Afghanistan. So they're very eager to cooperate with us in countering these narcotics problems. We have also well-developed cooperation on counter-terrorism. As you know, Russia herself has suffered from terrorist attacks, and we have, in close collaboration, developed initiatives and techniques to counter terrorism. Recently, we have also enhanced cooperation on counter-piracy. So these are examples that we have made progress in our cooperation with Russia. But as you know very well, we have our disagreements with Russia in other areas. One of them is missile defense. We have decided to build a NATO missile defense because we consider the missile threat a real threat, and against that real threat we need a real defense. That's why we will build a NATO missile defense system. We have invited Russia to cooperate, but so far we haven't received a positive answer. On the contrary, now and then we have listened to harsh Russian rhetorics, threatening to introduce what they call countermeasures if we proceed with our missile defense system. And they request what they call guarantees, even legal guarantees, that our system is not directed against Russia. It is not directed against Russia. It's a purely defensive system with the aim to protect our populations and our societies. So their criticism is not justified. Technically, our system is not designed to threaten Russia. We have offered cooperative instruments so that they could see with their own eyes that our system is not directed against Russia. Among other things, we have suggested to establish 2 jointly staffed missile defense centers that could create the framework for exchange of data, preparation of joint exercises, elaboration of joint threat analysis, etc., etc. So they could see with their own eyes that our system is defensive and not directed against Russia. And first and foremost, if they engage in active cooperation, that would be their best assurance that our system is not directed against Russia. And by the way, already in 1997, Russia and NATO signed a joint document called the Founding Act. In that Founding Act, we state that we will not use force against each other. We stick to that. We hope the Russians do the same. So what more could you expect? No, well, but that's where we are.
Secretary General, let me help you. Because, of course, you are being very diplomatic, and perhaps you should be. But there are events that raise voices of concern here in this country. Like, for example, the Ladoga exercises from earlier this year, in which the incident with Russian bombers assisted by Russian fighters have flown close to Stockholm through the Baltic Seas. I know it was the NATO jets from Lithuania that actually reacted because the Swedish Air Force was unable to react. But then again, we have, in next few months, we are expecting the huge Zapad exercises. some say NATO is reacting quite weakly. Will NATO react more strongly to that?
We're not reacting weakly, but appropriately. Let me stress that militaries do exercises, and should. We do the same. Actually, we are planning a major exercise hosted by Poland and the Baltic states by the end of this year. The exercise called Steadfast DS. So it's legitimate that militaries do exercise.
The scale and scope of which is far smaller than the Russian one.
Yeah, but it serves its purpose, I would say. My point is another one. My point is that we shouldn't complain about exercises because militaries do exercises. But having said that, transparency is of utmost importance. And that's how we approach this. We are fully transparent about our exercise. Actually, the Russians have already received information about our upcoming Steadfast Yes exercise, while we are still missing some information about the Russian exercises and their plans. So we would very much like to see reciprocity in that respect. So, in short, I think exercises are okay, but as a confidence-building measure, to make sure that there are no misunderstandings, and so that we know what is the purpose of an exercise, I would urge the Russians to provide full transparency as we do as regards our exercises.
But you're still not happy with that?
With
the you're still not happy with the Russian openness?
No, but they still have some time to provide the necessary information.
Thank you very much. I think that now it's time for professors. Yes. Ambassador Jerzy Marianowak is our future professor, please.
Euro-Atlantic Association, former ambassador to NATO. I have two questions regarding NATO-EU relations in view of the forthcoming Council of Europe you have alluded to. First, what is the chance of avoiding duplication of defense expenditures on both sides? And second, in very general terms and slightly simplifying, is there any chance, how you see it, is there any chance that NATO may in time become the organization, the alliance, which concentrates mainly on hard security, while EU rather on so-called soft security? Thank you.
I think it's of utmost importance to avoid duplication. That would be waste of money. 21 nations are members of both NATO and the European Union. But obviously in each country we just have one set of taxpayers and one set of military capabilities. So it would be ridiculous to engage in double work or duplication. So I think to avoid duplication is a major task, and that takes close coordination between NATO and the European Union. And that would also be my plea, that as we approach the European Council in December, we ensure such close coordination between NATO and the European Union so that we avoid duplication and unproductive competition between the two organizations and ensure complementarity. That's my goal. Now, I don't think we can just that we can make a clear division of labor where NATO is hard power and the European Union is soft power, I do not exclude the possibility that the European Union could also have some hard military capabilities to underpin the more soft parts of the foreign and security policy. I think it would be okay to have some military capabilities within an EU framework to take on more European responsibility to solve or to manage crises in the European neighborhood. But also here, it's of utmost importance that we ensure coordination. One example is our counter-piracy operation. We have an EU counter-piracy operation. We have a NATO counter-piracy operation. And they can work alongside each other if we ensure effective cooperation. In Kosovo, we have KFOR, NATO-led. We have EU-LEX, EU-led. In Afghanistan, we have ISAF, NATO-led. We have EU-POL, EU-led. So it is possible to have operations alongside each other if we ensure close coordination.
Sir, our National Defense Academy is a leader of defense education program, deep NATO program for Ukraine. NATO has similar 12 programs. Georgia, for example, Kazakhstan, Armenia, some others. What do you think about this type of activities, deep programs and some similar actions from NATO? And how you assess the importance of the military educational institution of the NATO countries?
I really welcome such activities. I appreciate such partnership activities. Now you mentioned in concrete terms Ukraine. As you may recall, we have decided in 2008 that Ukraine will become a member of NATO if they so wish and if they fulfill the necessary criteria. But as you also know, the new political leadership in Ukraine decided to pursue a non-alliance policy. So currently it's not on their agenda to apply for future NATO membership. But I do believe that it's of utmost importance to continue our partnership activities with Ukraine, including the activities you mentioned. In general, as I mentioned, I think in the coming years we should put even more focus on education, on training, on exercises, because that's part of what I consider the future NATO. As we draw down our operations, we should step up activities within training and education and exercises so that we maintain and further develop our ability to work and operate together. So educational activities are actually part of what I would consider the glue that binds our allies and our alliance together.
Thank you very much. Last question from... Yes, please.
Thank you very much, sir. I listened very carefully to your speech, Secretary General. I am impressed that you strongly underline two very important for us aspects. The first, political will, and the second, operational capabilities. So, could you assess, is there enough political will to build strong, effective missile defense system among the European NATO member countries? Is that possible in the near future? Thank you.
Yes, I think there is the will to do that. Actually, the decision to build the NATO missile defense was taken at the NATO summit in Lisbon in November 2010. So all 28 allies are committed and have committed themselves to building this NATO missile defense system. Obviously, the bulk of the input to the system will be provided by the Americans. But actually, a number of European allies also contribute, and I have already expressed my appreciation for the Polish contribution to our missile defense system, but other allies contribute as well. And whenever I visit capitals, I encourage European allies to consider constructively how they could contribute to the missile defense system. So based on the discussions I have when I visit allies, based on the discussions we have when ministers meet in Brussels, I feel confident that there is a strong political will to build an effective missile defense to provide effective protection of our populations.
Thank you very much, and absolutely last chance for Marek.
Thank you. Secretary General, from what you've said today and from the messages you've been delivering for a longer period, it seems as though NATO has found itself on a crossroads, or perhaps is facing a rivalry of visions. One vision that we've been fed perhaps since the greatest enlargement in 1999 and absolutely after the 9/11 events is a vision of a global NATO, one that takes responsibilities far away from its mandate territory. The other vision is a vision of limited NATO, maybe stronger in terms of definitions, one that focuses on territorial defense of its member states. Which vision would you personally support, and how much time do we have to take decisions on that?
A vision in between the two extremes, because I adhere to the view that our core task is territorial defense. But in today's world, territorial defense is quite different from territorial defense when NATO was established in 1949. We are faced with new threats and security challenges, and we must adapt. International terrorism, that's why we are in Afghanistan. It is to prevent the country from once again being a safe haven for terrorists that could launch attacks against our populations. Missile threats, that's why we built a missile defense system. Cyber attacks, that's why we are now strengthening our cyber defense. My point is, in today's world, it is necessary to go beyond our borders if we are to provide effective protection of our population. So effective territorial defense in today's world may very well start far beyond our borders, even in cyberspace. That's why I'm speaking not about a global NATO, but a NATO with a global perspective. A global perspective. And I can tell you that if you try to limit NATO to an old-fashioned view of what is territorial defense, then people would start to think that NATO isn't relevant any longer because it's not well equipped to address the real security challenges of today's world. So that's why I prefer the vision in between, not a global NATO, not a limited NATO, but a NATO with a global perspective.
Secretary General,
thank you very much, sir. We have only some seconds. Thank you very much, Marek. I would like to thank you for an excellent intellectual feast and great interaction with our audience. It was really magnificent. Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary General, to commemorate your presence here, let me present you with a traditional token of appreciation. It's a shield of the NDU stating, to the NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen, a man of a great heart, honored and great wisdom. a small additional gift, a special book from our Professor Adal Daniel Rothfeld. Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary General, may I ask you to leave your signature in our commemorative book?